Welcome to the front lines of the 21st century's greatest industrial challenge. We are looking at a nation transforming at breakneck speed, India. Here, the economy is surging, lifting millions, yet the country has simultaneously pledged a solemn commitment to the world, net zero emissions in less than 50 years. How do you reconcile an industrial revolution with a climate revolution? The answer lies in a technology that redefines our relationship with carbon. This is the story of India's strategic pathway to carbon capture, utilization and storage. Consider the sheer scale of the dilemma. On one hand, India is building skyscrapers, highways and infrastructure at a pace the world has rarely seen. On the other, the clock is ticking toward a net zero deadline. The tension is palpable. The heart of this conflict lies in the hard-to-abate sectors: power generation, steelmaking and cement. These aren't just industries. They are the backbone of development. Yet they account for roughly 70% of India's total emissions. To transition a developing economy, this fast requires more than just goodwill. It demands an industrial strength solution. We cannot simply turn off the lights or stop pouring concrete. The challenge, therefore, isn't just about reducing emissions. It's about deploying a multi-billion-dollar technology framework without putting the brakes on India's rise. To understand the urgency, we must look at the numbers projected for the year 2030. They are staggering. If we continue business as usual, coal-fired power plants alone are projected to pump out nearly 1,210,000,000 tons of carbon dioxide every single year. Look at the iron and steel sector. Emissions there are expected to nearly double from 2020 levels, hitting 450 million tons. Add another 325 million tons from cement, and you face a tidal wave of carbon. This is the baseline. If carbon capture, utilization and storage, or CCUS, is to be the shield against this impact, it must operate at a magnitude we are only just beginning to engineer. The math is unforgiving. We are dealing with gigatons, not kilograms. Now, a skeptic might ask, why not just shut down the dirty plants and build new green ones? In the West, that might work, where factories are nearing the end of their lives, but India's reality is radically different. This is a young fleet. Nearly two-thirds of India's steel capacity, that's 144 million tons per year, is less than 15 years old. A massive chunk of the coal power grid, over 200 gigawatts, is equally young. These are modern assets with decades of operational life remaining. You cannot simply scrap trillions of rupees of infrastructure. CCUS becomes the critical bridge, allowing us to retrofit these young giants. It ensures they can keep powering the economy while stripping away the carbon. It is not about closure, it is about evolution. This strategy is as much economic as it is environmental. Think of CCUS as an insurance policy for the national economy. By keeping these industries viable through decarbonization, India avoids an estimated economic hit of $6 billion per year by 2050. But the value goes beyond the balance sheet. It's about opportunity cost. If these plants were forced offline, imagine the energy shortages. Picture the cost of rebuilding entire supply chains from scratch. Most importantly, consider the human element. These industrial sites support millions of livelihoods. Retrofitting prevents massive job losses, protecting the social fabric while cleaning the sky. It is a pragmatic path that secures both the climate and the community. So once we capture this carbon, what do we do with it? In India, the philosophy leans heavily on utilization, turning a waste product into a revenue stream. We can inject the CO2 back into the earth to revitalize old energy fields, a process called enhanced oil recovery, or EOR. This alone has the potential to store over 3 billion tons of carbon while improving energy security. But innovation goes further. We can transform that same CO2 into green urea for farmers, convert it into methanol, or even lock it away permanently inside concrete building materials. By creating a market for carbon, we generate revenue that helps offset the high cost of capturing it. We stop treating carbon as trash and start treating it as a resource. However, utilization has its limits. For the sheer volume of emissions we face, We must look deeper, literally. Geologists have mapped India's subterranean potential, and the results are promising. The theoretical storage capacity is massive, estimated between 395 and 614 gigatons. Deep underground, we have vast saline aquifers, porous rock layers filled with salty water, capable of holding nearly 300 gigatons of CO2. Even more fascinating are the basaltic formations, ancient volcanic rock. When you inject CO2 here, it doesn't just sit there, it reacts chemically, mineralizing into solid stone over time. It is a permanent geological lockdown. The Earth itself becomes the vault. We have the sources of carbon, and we have the geological sinks. The challenge is connecting them. How do you link hundreds of scattered factories to these storage sites? You don't build a separate pipe for every chimney. That would be inefficient and prohibitively expensive. Instead, India is looking at a cluster and hub model. Imagine industrial zones where a power plant, a steel mill, and a fertilizer factory sit side by side. They share a common large-capacity pipeline network like a city's sewage system, but for carbon. These shared arteries carry the emissions from the entire cluster to a central disposal hub or utilization center. It is a masterclass in logistical efficiency, driving down costs through economies of scale. Speaking of costs, the economics of capture vary wildly depending on the chemistry involved. Not all smoke is created equal. Take gasification plants, for instance. Here, separating CO2 is already part of the production process, so the additional cost to capture it is relatively low, perhaps 340 to 420 rupees per ton. But for a standard coal-fired power plant, the challenge is harder. The CO2 is diluted, mixed with nitrogen and other gases. Separating it requires more energy and more money, pushing costs into the middle range, roughly 2,800 to 3,500 rupees per ton. It is a price disparity that policymakers must navigate carefully. Then we arrive at the most complex beasts of the industrial world, oil refineries, specifically the Fluid Catalytic Cracking Unit, or FCC. This is the heart of a refinery, cracking heavy crude into gasoline. But the process involves burning off carbon deposits, known as coke, to regenerate the catalyst. This combustion produces intense heat and large volumes of CO2. Capturing emissions here is technically demanding and financially steep. Estimates suggest costs could soar between 3,900 and 4,500 rupees per ton. It is one of the most expensive frontiers in the carbon battle, yet tackling these high-intensity sources is non-negotiable for a true net-zero transition. So, how does India fund this transition? The bill is substantial. Up to $6.7 billion for capture equipment alone by 2030, plus billions more for transport. The solution lies in financial innovation. The blueprint calls for a carbon capture finance corporation, a specialized green bank dedicated to CCUS. This entity wouldn't just lend money. It would co-invest, blending government budget with international climate funds to de-risk these massive projects. But the money is only half the story. The policy framework is equally vital. India is crafting a strategy that rewards reduction rather than punishing emission. It avoids crippling taxes that could drive industry overseas. Instead, we see the rise of a circular economy, a system where industrial scrap is valorized and the recycling sector is formalized. This approach creates new pathways for greenhouse gas abatement, turning waste into value and carbon credits into currency. This is the vision of a decarbonized India. It is a future where heavy industry and environmental stewardship coexist, where the geology of the subcontinent stores the emissions of its growth. It is a pathway that proves a developing nation does not have to choose between its prosperity and its planet. The gears are turning, the plans are drawn, and the transition has begun.